Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name's David Saunderson, and welcome to the Spooky Isles. Tonight we've got a very special guest, Simon Entwistle. Hi, how are you, Simon?
Very well, thanks, David. Nice to see you again.
It's lovely to have you. We've had Simon on Spooky Isles on our YouTube channel in the past. He was such good fun that we've asked him back again. Simon's a tour guide from the north of England. He's based from Clitheroe in Lancashire, and he's got tons of tales that he can entertain us all with. And Simon, I was mentioning to you just before we came on that I was actually in Clitheroe this day 4 years ago. I went up to visit a friend, and it just happens to be of all the towns and all the world, I came to see yours, and I didn't get to see your tour, which is a pity. And I really would have liked to. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be, quite an award-winning tour guide up in the north of England and regaling people with tales of ghostly and hauntings?
Right, David. Well, two reasons really. First of all, my dad. My dad was a very, very down-to-earth sort of person, really. And he saw a ghost way back in 1960. And that's when I took a real interest in the subject. But the tourism side really took place, shall I say, in 1979, when I joined the army. And I was sent to a beautiful city called York, a place called Strensall Barracks. And of course, we had every weekend off, most nights off. And I go to the city centre, and they would see these ghost walks. And I went to many of them, and I got really bitten by the tourism side to ghostly guided tours. And that's where it all started, really. My dad and the city of York.
Okay. Well, York is known as one of Britain's, most haunted places, so you can't really go wrong there. But you've actually been able to find out about quite a lot of the ghostly tales around Lancashire, at the Lake District, all sort of that side of England. What have you ever had your own experience as a person seeing any kind of ghosts?
David, the nearest thing would actually be in 2005. Very, very true story, this one, actually. I'm sure many of us ask ourselves, is there life after this one? And I've asked that same question myself. Way back in 2005, my brother died. And it was a real shock. It wasn't expected. He was quite young, really. And he had this huge, massive heart attack, God bless him. And his partner telephoned me. It was the sort of story that the phone call you never, ever really want to hear. I knew that the funeral would take place in a little village church in Cumbria, where I attended as a child. My father's buried in the same cemetery. And I felt compelled to go to that church 3 days before the funeral. I just felt compelled. I got there around 10 o'clock in the morning, walked inside. The church is never locked. It's a little village church away from society, if you will. And I sat in a pew and thought about my childhood experiences and my brother, of course. And these two women came from nowhere. Two very elderly ladies, but they had really, really pleasant smiles. And they said, one said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Well, I'm here because my brother, really, his funeral's in 3 days' time." "Oh, can we pray for you?" I thought, well, yeah, sure. So I was sitting in the pew, I had one lady one side, another lady the other side, and they both clasped their hands together in prayer. And I shut my eyes in respect and felt this hand on my forehead. I felt the curvature of a hand. I opened my eyes, and both these women had their hands tightly clasped together. I then recognized that hand as being my brother's hand. It really was. And it was the most amazing feeling of euphoric feeling of a message coming from the other side through my brother, just to say he was okay. But David, as I left the church, I turned, and those two women were not there. They just literally vanished. I got home and had a word with my wife, and I then had a word with one of the local reverends that I knew quite well in Clitheroe, and he just laughed and said, "Oh, Simon, don't worry. Those two women were angels." And who am I to say they weren't, David? But I felt this hand on my forehead, and that's the nearest thing I've ever got to a paranormal experience. But I swear to you, and indeed everyone watching, that is very, very true.
Well, I mean, it's not very close to a paranormal experience. It sounds like very much like a paranormal experience.
Yes, yeah.
So, what with the tours you're doing, and unfortunately, obviously not being able to do many at the moment, what are you missing the most from doing these tours?
Oh, David, I'm missing meeting people, really. I miss going to hotels to climb into a coach, take people to the Lake District, take people to various venues in the northwest of England. I've really missed that. And I've also missed, of course, the ghost walks. And I cover halls as well. I take groups around halls. I've not worked since March the 27th. And I've got to be honest with you, David, it has actually depressed me quite a lot, really. I don't feel, I feel there's something really missing, and it's that, really.
Yeah, I think we could all appreciate that. But given this is what you do, as your livelihood, and it's something you do every day. I mean, I couldn't imagine what it'd be like if I wasn't being able to, do spooky owls or talk to people on the internet like this. But it must be really, and that's why it's really great that you've been able to come here today and talk to people. I mean, obviously it's no substitute for real life, face-to-face type contact. Now, as what we do on this, I'm going to call it a show. That's me being a bit conceited, but on this show, we're going to let people have a few questions during the ask some questions basically and have some interaction. We've had Andrew Murphy here. He's just asked a quick question. He said, has Simon used the time to build up a background on any new stories or tales that he might use on tours in the future?
Yes, I have. I've done a lot of reading, but I do find the very, very best way to get a good ghost story is to talk to someone. And you can always tell when someone's pulling your leg. You can always tell when someone's being very, very honest. And it's those lovely, honest ghost stories which I find intriguing, really. But I've got a lot more material, and I could walk into any stage and give a good hour, 2 hours of constant storytelling that would really grip the imagination, David. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we probably don't have enough time for 2 or 3 hours, but I mean, we may be able to do that in the future. But Andrew was talking about news stories, but one story I'd like to really talk to you about tonight, well, not talk to you about, let you, weave your magic. Tell us about your one of your first ghost experiences. And you were saying it was in a family home, and so I'm just going to let you go, do your thing, and then once you've finished the story, because I know how you kind of work, you give a tale, let you do it, and then we can ask some questions afterwards. So go for it, Simon.
Thank you very much, David. We're going to turn the clock back now to 1960. Now, my father bought this very, very beautiful Victorian house in a place called Greenside, which is not too far from the town of Kendal, in between Windermere and Kendal. Beautiful, beautiful house. And I arrived there at the age of 5 years old. And as I left the Pickford's removal vehicle, I looked at this 3-story building and I thought, this is gorgeous. And I fell in love with the building and indeed the whole area. I had a brother who was 10, a sister who was 2, and Mum and Dad were very, very concerned about us being very tired, and they made our beds up very quickly, and we all fell into a deep sleep. Mum and Dad carried on working, emptying tea chests full of crockery and knives and forks, etc. And around 1 o'clock in the morning, they thought they'd make their own bed, and they did do, because it was a country house away from civilization. The last job they needed to do, really, was to put up any curtains. They got into bed and Dad turned over and noticed there was bright, bright moonlight coming straight from the window, illuminating the whole bedroom. He then heard the sounds of tiny footsteps, and the door of the bedroom slowly opened and in came a liver and white Cocker Spaniel. He thought, how's that dog got in here? I must have left the door open downstairs. He got out of bed, walked towards the dog to grab its collar to say, come on, let's have you. His hand went straight through it. He made a second attempt and his hand went through the dog for the second time. The dog then turned to look at the bedroom window as if its name was being called, and then shimmered and disappeared. My mother had been in a very deep sleep at the time, and she woke up with a jolt. Oh, I've had a strange dream. It's clear as day. There's a man outside the house pointing up at our bedroom window with a dog lead in his hand. My father, who had been sitting there in the bed, suddenly turned and told my mother exactly what had happened, and they put 2 and 2 together. Now, they never told me until I was in my teens, and it was a story that absolutely fascinated me and still does. In 1974, my father sold the house, And it absolutely broke my heart because I had so many happy memories of primary school, secondary modern school, Christmases, etc., birthdays, and of course the lovely venue where the house was actually situated. So it broke my heart. And as I left the house, I've left with a very, very sad and empty heart. However, only 4 years ago, my wife and I went on a Mediterranean cruise. And they have what's called black tie events on the cruise ship we went on. And I put my dicky bow tie and went down to the restaurant with my wife, sat down, and 2 tables away, there was a young lady, a very attractive young lady that kept smiling at me. And I thought, I really cannot be that good looking. As it happens, she came across and said, "It's Simon, isn't it?" "Yeah, that's right. I come from Blackburn," she said. "I'm the events manager here on the Oceania cruise liner. Simon, I've been in your coach tours and your walking tours. Have you ever thought about doing a talk in a cruise ship?" I said, "Well, would people really like ghosts, murders and mysteries?" "Oh, I think they will, you know." She gave me an email address, and I went back to England and I contacted what's called Carnival Cruises, part of the P&O brand. Much to my surprise and delight, within 3 days, I got a response saying, "Simon, we'd like to audition you as a PowerPoint show lecturer on one of our ships. You can come down to Sussex to do the audition or go to Cumbria." Now, living in Lancashire, of course, Cumbria is just around the corner, and I know the area quite well. So I chose to go to Cumbria. I was given the telephone number of a lady called Maureen, and I telephoned her, and she said, "Simon, bring your laptop, bring your stories, of course. My house is rather hard to find," she said. "I'll give you a sat-nav code." So I set off on this Tuesday afternoon in February 4 years ago and found myself driving up towards the city of Lancaster that I knew very well, through Lancaster, up towards South Cumbria, past my little primary school as I went to as a boy, over what we call Heversham Head, and then down to the driveway and up to that very, very same house that my father sold all those years ago. As I arrived there, you could imagine I was jaded. I was shocked. I thought, no. I parked up outside. I looked up at the 3-story building. I knocked on the door. Maureen, the cruise director, opened the door. "Right, Simon, come on. We've got quite a lot to go through now. Bring your laptop." "You look a bit jaded," she said. "Well, Maureen, I know you won't believe this, but I used to live here." No, I did. "I've got some pictures on my laptop. I'll show you," which I did do, and it confirmed it. She said, "Right, let's make a cup of tea." I sat down on this sofa and I looked at the ceiling and looked at the doorknobs, looked at the floor, and memories came flooding back of my childhood, of course. She came back with a tray of tea. I then told her about my father's ghostly experience. Her eyes widened. The teacup fell through her fingers and smashed on the floor, and she looked deep into my eyes. "Simon, my brother comes from London. Every Christmas he spends Christmas with me and my husband. The very, very first Christmas he had what would have been your mother and father's bedroom upstairs. In the early hours of the morning, the door opened, and in came a liver and white cocker spaniel." I swallowed deeply. I looked at the ceiling, and my dad had passed away many, many years ago. I just looked towards the heavens and said, "You know, Dad, thank you. What a story." And I can assure you, David, that is a true story.
It is pretty unbelievable. I'm not saying it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and it's a fantastic story. Even just to have found that house. Never mind, the ghost story.
Yeah.
Do anyone have any questions that for you at the moment? Because I mean, obviously, I'm just trying to take all that in, and it's an interesting thought to even. I mean, have you ever seen any other ghost dogs or anything like that in the past? I don't. Have you heard of anything like that elsewhere in that area?
No, I haven't. But on the Isle of Man, there is actually the dog that haunts Peel Castle, Isle of Man. There's quite a few in Ireland as well. But what I do know, David, is the house was built in 1898. It was built for a chap called the High Sheriff of Westmoreland. There's some old stables nearby, which have been converted into a hen farm, would you believe? And also, this chap had his own gun dogs. And I believe that liver and white cocker spaniel was a gun dog that loved that house so much it couldn't bear to leave it, and was almost welcoming new people when they arrived. Because my father never ever saw it again, and Maureen's brother never saw it again. So I believe that whoever does move there, this dog will be waiting to greet them. That's my personal feelings anyway.
Okay, we've actually got a question here from Tamela. Says, Simon, and these, you know, when someone's telling you a false story, how can you tell if something, you know, because you do a lot of research, when can you work out if it's a bit of a pork pie?
Right. Well, I do a lot of tours for various councils actually, and I meet what's called tourism officers. We sit down, and they've been very, very helpful, but they've also encouraged people to come to the town halls for me to talk to them. And you can always tell when someone is really pulling a porky, because they're basically taking the mickey out of you. They're basically taking the mickey out of you. But I firmly believe, David, that there is another life after this one. And I firmly believe that ghosts do exist. But I believe they come from the other side. That's my personal feelings.
Okay.
But you can always tell when a story comes from the heart, and I do have many of them, which I'd love to convey, perhaps in future shows, David.
Okay, we've got a question here now. It's from Paul, and he's asking a question. We don't really have enough time to go through different areas, obviously around your area, but it's just I do want to ask you a little bit about the tourism in the area that you work in. I kind of know Wigan. Paul's asking, do you have any ghost stories relating to Wigan? Is that something that's within your area?
I don't actually go into Wigan with my tours. We do Greater Manchester, which does have a few stories. But Wigan's a very, very, very famous town, of course. Not just famous for its rugby, but it's also the home of some very, very famous stars as well that have come up over the years, including the great George Formby, who was quite brilliant, and Uncle Joe's mint balls, of course, which are quite fantastic. And if you ever want a real pie, you've got to go to Wigan, because when it comes to pies, Wigan are top notch. But what I would do, I mean, if I was approached by, shall I say, tourism officials from Wigan, I would go to the local newspaper and I would ask if people would like to come see me, and I would get genuine stories from them. That's the way you do it, David, really.
Yeah, well, I think
rather than read, it's best to meet local people.
I think that's right. You'd find those stories out. We just got Yvonne Hunter here. She's just saying she believes dogs come back and show themselves as she's seen her own past dogs. So I think we actually mentioned this last week. I think it's obviously a very popular sort of a thing within the paranormal that people do tend to see their pets in the future. Someone else has asked, do you have any on Bluebell Woods in Manchester? My parents used to tell me of the place when I was younger. You still there, Simon?
I've got to say, I've never ever been to Bluebell Wood. So again, that is quite new to me.
Yeah, we're having a bit of trouble here.
Never been to Bluebell Wood, so I wouldn't know about that one really.
Okay. I've got a question for you, just from Mary here. She said she met you on a Pendle Witch weekend a few years ago, which was fascinating. Do you think there's any element in truth into the accusations, or do you think they were unfairly persecuted? Obviously, Pendle healers would be a little bit of bread and butter for you, coming from where you come from. What do you think about the Pendle Witches?
Well, it's a fantastic story, really. The only window we have got in the Pendle Witch story is a book written in 1613 called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire by Thomas Potts. And Thomas, as it had families, the Shattocks and Demdike families, and they hated each other with a vengeance. And they tried to get each other into trouble by telling the local magistrate about dogs such as Tib, Bull, Fancy, Dandy, visiting them, sucking blood from them, and how they made clay pictures. But in the Device family, they had a little girl called Jeanette and a boy called James. And they incriminated themselves, but also incriminated the whole families. The jury consisted of men only, And in those days, in 1612, women were not allowed to possess a brain. It was believed by some men that women didn't even have a brain. So when it came to male chauvinism, women suffered terribly. So we got really self-incrimination. And we have a magistrate who really did want to curry favour with the King of England, King James the First. And it's a terrible, tragic story. Why Steven Spielberg has never made a film, I shall never, ever know. Never know, because it would make a blockbuster. It's, as you say, David, it is one of my most popular tours. And we have coach parties that will go onto the hill. And I do actually work quite closely with Haunted Happenings, Spooktacular and Dust Till Dawn. And they will book me on a regular basis. They will bring with them mediums. And one of them is a fantastic guy called Kevin Bruff. I mean, he's so good. He amazed me one night because he actually picked up a friend of mine, which he wouldn't know. He wouldn't know him, but he got his name and knew exactly what I was feeling, which is a bit concerning, to be honest.
I would think so. It was actually the reason I went up to Clitheroe that time 4 years ago was actually to sort of check out some of the Pendle Hill sites. I suppose that's a reason that someone would run a spooky website that would want to go up to Pendle. So just we're going to go on to another story from you in a sec. I've just got a couple of questions here. Someone's asked, do you ever do talk about magical folk such as fairies and things like that in any of your tours?
Not so much fairies, but Carlisle Castle has some intriguing stories, and there's quite a beautiful story there of a lady the name of Jean Hemmings, and her husband was a sheep rustler, and he'd been condemned to death, and she had telepathic skills, and she also told him how to escape from the castle by making some knotted sheets and climb down the back of the castle through the grill at the back. And she whisked him away. But she did it through telepathy, apparently. And it's a clever way of doing things, really, isn't it?
It would be. Now, a lot of people asking different questions about, their own towns and stuff like that. And Simon, you've written some books, or you've written, and there we go. Ghostly Tales of the Unexpected. Now, I believe these are not necessarily true stories. They're more scary fictional tales.
Some are very, very true, but it's good to use the imagination, David. And using imagination, you can create a great story. And this is the first time I've ever told this story ever before on the internet. So it's a real pleasure to tell it, David. I've just called it simply The Taxi. And I'd like you all to go to, shall I say, a built-up area. It could be Manchester, it could be Blackburn, it could be London, it could be Birmingham. But we're going to go to a fictitious Asian family that live in Blackburn. And a young boy called Ashid, he's a taxi driver. And Ashid is always looking for a bargain in terms of taxes. He buys a magazine called the Exchange and Mark magazine and looks through it. And there he sees a Ford Granada estate car, only done 4,000 miles. And the owner wants just £3,000 for it. He thought, that's a bargain. He drove over to Bolton and met a gentleman called John Hodgson. And Hodgson said, there's the keys, lad. You can go and give it a test drive if you want to. So Ashid took the vehicle for a test drive around Bolton and thought it's handling beautifully. The engine's fine, the gears are fine, the brakes are fine. He brought it back to the forecourt and said to Hodgson, it's a great vehicle, but why do you want to sell it? In my business, I need to sell quickly, said Hodgson. So Ashid bought the vehicle and took it back to Blackburn, had it Hackney registered. That night, he took the new vehicle out with its brand new radio, and he went to a place called Bromley Cross, which is in between Bolton and in between Blackburn, on a rather horrible road called the A666, which is a very straight, long road that goes past a place called Turton Towers. She dropped 3 giggling, mini-skirted young ladies off at a public house in Bromley Cross and then set off home again. As he was driving back down the A666, he looked into the rearview mirror and saw a car advancing at great speed. The car went past. He then glanced up again at the rearview mirror and was staring into the eyes of an elderly lady with grey hair and glasses. He thought, no, she shouldn't be there. He jammed the brakes on, stopped the vehicle and started to run away from the vehicle. He stopped about 100 yards away, turned round and gingerly reached into his pocket and placed a cigarette between his lips and lit the cigarette and then walked back to the vehicle. The engine was still running. His door was open, but there was no one on the back seat. He would not get back in the vehicle. He telephoned his brother Nawaz, who was in bed. Nawaz was furious, but drove up the A666 to find him in the lay-by, and they swapped vehicles over. They took the vehicle back to Blackburn, and the following day, Ashid's father, Ali, took it out. He made his way to Preston, to Great Harwood, over to Burnley, and on the journey back in the early hours of the morning, it became very cold inside the vehicle. He glanced at the rearview mirror, and he too was staring into the eyes of an elderly lady with grey hair and glasses. Like his son, he was horrified, stopped the vehicle, would not get back in, and for the second time, the second son, Nawaz, had to come out to take the vehicle back. He said, "This is getting beyond a joke." The vehicle was taken back, and the following morning, the daughter, Shanaz, had the job of cleaning all three vehicles, all three taxis. When she came to the new taxi, she cleaned the dashboard, cleaned the steering wheel, hoovered the front seats. Then she felt she was being watched. She glanced up at the rearview mirror, and she too was staring into the eyes of an elderly lady, grey hair and glasses. She rushed back into the building, into her father's arms, and her father said, "That's it. That vehicle is going back. It's going back." Well, Nawaz was the only person that never saw the ghostly character in the back seat, so he was given the job of driving the vehicle back to Bolton, whilst Ali, Ashid and Shanaz got in the second vehicle and drove behind them. As they drove into the forecourt of Hodgson's garage in Bolton, Hodgson came out and said, "There's nothing wrong with that vehicle. It's got a full MOT. It's got a good service record. It's got a brand new wing." Ashid said, "Why has it got a brand new wing?" "Oh, well, it was involved in a road traffic accident. There was an elderly lady killed in the back seat, actually. I've got an old Bolton Evening newspaper. I'll show you." He went into his office, into the locker, opened the locker, and brought out an oil-stained Bolton Evening newspaper. As he skipped through it, on the fourth page, Ashid, Ali, and Shanaz looked at a photograph of the lady that had been killed in that vehicle. It was the same lady they'd all seen. As they drove away, Hodgson sold the car again to someone else. You'll find that story in my book, Ghostly Tales of the Unexplained, folks. And you can get that, of course, on Amazon. And right now I'm actually working on an audio book, because with audio, there's no spelling mistakes, there's no punctuation problems. And it's a lot easier to produce than writing, folks, because my spelling is disgraceful. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I'm sure what I'll do is I'll put the link in there when I upload this to YouTube, and people can see that. Now, I've got just a couple more. Thank you for that. It's just a lovely story, and I love the fact that you used Asian people, because oftentimes we hear lots of ghost stories around England, and it's always, very much white type of middle class type people that are involved in these ghost stories. So it's interesting seeing something a little bit different. Have you actually come across many people from other backgrounds in Britain that have experienced ghosts in your time?
Only American, Australian, New Zealand, South African, but that's because we speak the same language, really. But some of the finest ghost stories do come from all those countries, of course, really. I'd say that, America, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, they do have some great characters, of course, as well.
Yeah. So we don't have much time. I've got a couple of more questions for you, Simon, and then we'll have to finish for the night.
Sure.
I just want to relay something. Someone's asked about, have you had much to do with Lancaster Castle over the years?
Yes, I have. My Pendle Witch tour. In the morning, we go around all the villages. We go over Pendle Hill. We then make our way over what's called the Trough of Bowland to the city of Lancaster. And we will go to what's called the Witch's Tower, the Well Tower, this horrible, horrible, deep, deep underground dungeon, which is still there to this very, very day, where these poor unfortunate Pendle Witches were chained to the floor in appalling conditions. But Lancaster City Castle, of course, was a place of execution. Some amazing stories from there. And it's actually owned by the Queen, would you believe? But I would love it if they could just do something a bit more tourism-wise with it, in the form of having more more guided tours there, really.
Okay. Well, I mean, it looks like when this is all over, we're all going to have to come up and see you, because you're really whetting our appetite. I'm going to leave it there. I know a couple of people have asked questions. We'll try to get them answered online. Thank you, Simon. We'll be promoting your book, obviously, and
Thank you.
And hopefully we get you back at some stage. Hopefully
Love to.
even after lockdown, when you're far too busy for us because you're running all these live tours. What have you got? Have you got anything coming up that people should know about other than the audio book?
No, not really. I've got my diary as we speak, and there are a few tours booked for July, coach tours for July, but it's going to be another very long period of time, David. I think I'll have to come to London and have a chat to you, I reckon.
That'd be fantastic. All right. Anyway, thanks very much, everyone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a link for our YouTube channel, which will give you, people want to click on that a little bit later. We'll have uploaded this. And of course, we spoke to Simon last year when the lockdown first started, and we've got some of his interviews and you telling some stories and other similar people. So once again, thank you, Simon. It's been fantastic. I knew it would be, so I'm never disappointed.
Thank you, David, for very kindly having me. Greatly appreciated.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time from the Spooky Hours. Bye-bye.